what's going on, everybody? For Cryptocurrent, my name is Stephen Miller, and you're watching Cryptocurrent Live, the show where we bring you the latest and greatest in cryptocurrency news and the biggest things that are sending shockwaves across the world of cryptocurrency and blockchain. I'm joined today again by my co-host, Chris Corneros. Chris, how we doing?
Doing great, Steve. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. It's another beautiful day in crypto land, but we've got some drama to talk about. We've got some big news on deck. But before we begin and we get too far into it, I want to make sure that everybody knows that we do these shows every single Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern here on YouTube. But we also recast this show 2 days following each of these events. So our Tuesday show gets recast on Thursday, and our Thursday show gets recast on Saturday via all of our podcast platforms. So you can just follow Cryptocurrent Podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Um, Again, very big show ahead today. I really just want to dive right in, Chris. We, of course, are talking about this massive news from crypto.com in the arena naming rights purchase, but a whole lot more is ahead. So let's just go ahead and jump into some buy, seller, hodl.
Buy, sell, or hodl.
Every time we take you through buy, sell, or hodl, we are giving you the latest and greatest, and we like to break it down in a way that lets you know whether or not we are bullish, bearish, or just in the middle, and we need to hodl and wait for a story to develop. The first story on deck today, Chris, is this story about one of the Fed governors who apparently is not so about a CBDC. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, one of the Federal Reserve governors, Christopher J. Waller, came out yesterday afternoon and said that he was fully behind stablecoins. He said that CBDCs, so central bank digital currencies, they weren't really needed in the United States. Of course, he's not talking on a broad spectrum. He was more specifically talking about the United States and said that private kind of development of these alternative payment systems, like stablecoins specifically, is what he was talking about, are great sources of innovation and a great step forward. And he didn't think that the U.S. needed a CBDC, mainly because it would kind of hamper innovation and there was no real need for it when you have all these systems in place. And he sees it kind of as this genuine form of payment and currency and an alternative, which is shocking, as I'm sure Steve could tell you. He was surprised when I told him that news, because this is essentially a complete 180 from any sort of government news we've received. I mean, the most positive really we've heard are, mostly GOP senators kind of coming out and taking a laissez-faire approach to crypto. But this is the first time we have a member of the United States government coming out in outright support of crypto in any form, really. So really exciting news. That being said, he did have three issues. First and foremost was that the stable coins themselves could be potentially destabilizing, where essentially what he's saying is that the unregulated or unscrupulous issuers provide financial instruments that go bad, which would create a panicked flight to safety that extends beyond the initial investors and depositors. Okay. Basically, he's saying that if you have a stablecoin issuer and the assets backing those stablecoins kind of collapse, it's going to freak out everyone who's invested in them. And it could basically create this cascading effect that no one is prepared for. Second, he thought that there could be a potential payment system failure where the responsibility for different payment functions becomes scattered across the network due to stablecoins decentralization. All right. So, kind of looking at the core of crypto as basically an aspect of what could be an issue down the line. And then finally, a risk of scale. And what he means here is that as some of these stable coins become more massive, just grow in their utilization, the amount that they've kind of distributed, that it could lead to a monopoly on the stable coin kind of industry, if you will. Mainly because, look at the top two stable coins that I'm sure most people hear about in their daily lives, which you have USDT Tether and USDC, which is USD coin. Those are the two big boys. And if one kind of edges out the other, then as decentralized as we would like it to be or think of it, The reality is it still is centralized to some degree because it's only one coin as opposed to several. Steve, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, there's a lot to get into here, and I do want to spend a minute talking about this. As much as people don't necessarily think that stablecoins are like the most exciting news, this is a very interesting development, in my opinion. Um, First and foremost, just to give a little bit of clarity, and Chris, you may know this better than I do. I'm pretty sure I know this. Like, there is not just one governor of the Federal Reserve. There is like multiple governors across the board, right?
Correct. Yeah, and I may be wrong on this. Don't quote me, but it's my understanding. I believe you have something like 13 governors, kind of in the same way that you have kind of different federal courts throughout the country. There are also different Federal Reserve locations, each with its own governor. And then the kind of head of the Federal Reserve, I believe, is located in New York City. So one of 13, I believe.
Yeah, that was pretty much as I understood it as well. So let's just go with that understanding first. So this is basically one of 13 that's come out and decided to make a comment on it. Knowing that that's just exactly what it is, it's one of 13. Is this massive news for buy seller hodl? It's hodl news. That's just my opinion. But if we're taking this apart a little bit more so based on why he's in favor of it and why we should be actually discussing this in the first place, I think it comes down to those three issues and like taking it apart a little bit. Because when you mentioned that it is potentially destabilizing, part of me immediately thinks that that may be a little bit of an aggressive argument against stablecoins. The payment system failure argument, I think that's very simple to argue against because you have the biggest creditors in the world have already adopted USDC as a means of paying off debts. You also have the risk of scale issue in that it's already very distributed. Now, could we see in 5 to 10 years, the likes of USDT and USDC joining forces and combining to create one stable? Yeah, potentially that could happen. But realistically speaking, a lot of these stables are going to remain separate because they want to provide different routes. You have three on screen right now. If you're joining us via YouTube, the three are USDT, Tether, USDC, and the Paxos dollar. But outside of this, you also have True USD, you have Gemini USD, you have Binance USD, you have so many others, including one that we talked about recently in Magic Internet Money. I'll be real with you. I think that the only chance that we get close to something that would be seen as monopolistic is if Magic Internet Money is successful in what it aims to do in terms of creating a means of exchanging damn near any stable into a market where you can have a unified currency. So, risk of scale, I don't necessarily see that as an issue. I don't see that as something that's going to happen. But do I favor this over a CBDC? And if I were you, the listener, would I favor this over a CBDC? Absolutely. 110%. Like, we do not need the central banks to get involved in this. We already have stable coins that are out there available, able to be exchanged for. It's just like pick your poison on which one you want to actually utilize. Um, to me, that we have finally somebody that is in favor of them in the Fed, that's a massive win for the stable argument. But Chris, do you think that, I guess, this Fed governor's take is correct, or is this just the start of a bigger argument that we're going to see happen?
I mean, it definitely is the start of a greater argument, right? This is only one of what we said 13 Federal Reserve governors. I just looked, I believe he is based out of St. Louis originally. I don't know if he's still there, but just a little background on him. Um, and so it definitely will be the start of a wider conversation, right? Because the next step here really isn't going to be anyone else in the government, any investors talking about it. The most important discussion will be what he discusses with other Federal Reserve governors, and most importantly, who the Fed chair, what they have to say about this. That being said, I agree with you to a point, Steve, about the issues. I think the risk of scale is not as big of an issue. I get why he brought it up.
Mhm.
My biggest concern, though, is more the payment system failure because, in theory, I'm saying USDC, but all stable coins should be backed 1-to-1 with fiat.
Agreed.
However, every single one of them is not. The best, actually, so the highest percentage of their stablecoin that is backed with fiat currently is USDC,
Hmm.
but they're only about 80%, I think, back. They still have about 20% with some kind of, I think, index funds and or federal bonds. So it is definitely risky, right? Because even though USDC is the least risky, I believe, out there right now in terms of its financial backing, there is still a chance that, you know, 20% of their assets disappear overnight. And in which case, there's a problem.
Yeah. And look, I think that there is a lot to be said of stablecoins, but at the very same time, like in this whole decentralized world that we're operating in, there's a bigger thing that needs to be spoken to. And it's just now starting to get addressed. And that is that if we want to be decentralized, why are we anchoring our entire system to a USDC based stablecoin to begin with? And right now, the big project out there that's trying to tackle this exact issue is that of Olympus DAO. So, just a name to be putting on your radar, they're essentially trying to be the official reserve currency of the decentralized world. So they're removing themselves from USD terms and creating almost like a central bank from within the DAO it's meant to operate strictly within the metaverse. So it's interesting to me whether it's buy, sell, or hodl. I still say hodl. Keep your eye out for Olympus DAO, but let's dive into our next set of stories. And this is going to be new for us here.
Uh,
Um,
One quick note, Steve,
Go
for
ahead.
all our listeners. Just so you're clear, Olympus DAO is different from Olympus. Olympus itself is a rebase coin, Olympus DAO, a
Correct.
stable coin. If you want to learn more about rebase coins, there's a Crypto Basics with Chris K video up on our YouTube channel. You can go check that out and learn what a rebase coin is and why you probably want to stay very far away from them.
Yeah, perfect pitch. Appreciate you doing that video again. Go up and take a look at that. It'll teach you more about Rebase, of course, and also what Olympus is up to at large. In our next piece of buy seller hodl for the week, what we're going to start doing here on buy seller hodl on Thursdays is we're going to bring you a specific NFT update segment, and this is what has been going on in NFTs this week. Obviously, NFTs are still one of the hottest parts of the crypto market, and it's just starting to heat up now that the market's been in a slight decline. So we're going to cover a couple stories real quick, and the biggest of which, in my opinion, is that Discord made an announcement earlier on in the week or earlier on last week that came across the wires in a much bigger way, much closer towards the weekend, where they were announcing and tipping the hat at integrating with NFTs via MetaMask until they weren't. Um, Chris and I discussed this at length a little bit, but they pulled back on this, namely because they were getting an absolute Twitter war from people who think that crypto is completely environmentally not friendly. And what was the other argument, Chris, that they were making?
That was the main one. TLDR. This was essentially the crypto bro community on Twitter versus the furry community. Now, for 99% of the people on the planet, the furry community, is irrelevant to your daily life. For Discord, for the internet community, I'll call it, right? So gamers, influencers, the furry community is very important because they operate almost entirely online.
Yep.
And their main form of communication happens to be Discord. And while Discord is massive enough, now worth billions of dollars, to kind of withstand that departure, it is still a sizable enough departure where they're going to listen to that part of their user base and say, okay, if there's this much pushback, we're not going to force this feature in yet. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's almost inevitable that they're going to do this at some point. And what people need to understand is that like this move is not bad for the environment in any way, form, or fashion. One of the biggest issues with Discord right now is, especially with bigger servers, we are seeing more and more that these servers are able to be hacked. Okay. So people are getting in, posing as the account admins and making fraudulent statements, but also directing them to phishing links. So that's a really big deal. And authenticating via an encrypted access point in Web3 actually alleviates that issue with being able to hack around the system and create fraudulent access points. So, interesting bit. Another really quick one that happened in the NFT world this past week. Sotheby's announced that they're officially going to be accepting Ethereum bids on future auctions. This is huge because you've probably seen in the past that Sotheby's has been auctioning off higher and higher value NFTs, including the works of Beeple and Bored Ape Yacht Club, and even some of the bigger, higher profile art blocks pieces like Fidenza and Ringers. So the fact that people will be able to actually bid an ETH from here forward is a very big deal for this. The next piece has to do with Bored Ape Yacht Club. And to say that it's been going bananas across the past week is an understatement. You have new members into BASE, including Jimmy Fallon, Post Malone, and even BitBoy, who announced he bought a Bored Ape yesterday. But you also have Jimmy.eth coming out and saying that he actually signed a deal with Universal Music Group that's going to bring 4 of his apes together into a band called Kingship. And Kingship is going to be releasing music and will be a big performing entity in the metaverse in the near future. That is a really compelling story to me, Chris. Like, I really, really like this story.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I mean, if you haven't, for anyone listening, recently Gary V came out, Gary Vaynerchuk, if you don't know him, large kind of business influencer, I think would be the best way to describe him. You'll see clips of him everywhere, even if you don't want to. But he came out recently and said that, NFTs are the future of the music industry because for the longest time, the record labels, they were the capital essentially that were investing in these acts, providing them with money to go and record in studios, go on tour, etc. But now you have these artists who, they can come up on SoundCloud, on TikTok, whatever, they can grow their brand, create music, and then rather than use a distributor like a record label, they could come out and just mass release it via NFT, which I believe it was Tyga who did earlier this year. I can't remember who.
A few of them did actually, but like in any event, like it is going to disrupt a lot of industries. It's not just going to disrupt music, but it's important to understand that you have big influencers like Gary Vee out there that are speaking not just in favor of NFTs and the impact it's going to have on the greater world, but the fact that he's willing to point out right now that it's going to directly impact the way the music industry works is a very, very big deal because it means that that's going to be one of the first places that we start to see this impact being made. The final piece out of the Bored Ape Yacht Club news is that Bored Ape Yacht Club is going to be debuting a mobile game soon, which I think is very, very interesting. I'm not necessarily sure the full utility behind it, but it's my understanding that high scores will, in fact, be kind of like a play to earn type model. So I'm interested to see how that deploys. But that is what we have. Oh, I'm sorry. There was one other piece to NFT update I wanted to mention. That was the ENS airdrop from last week. We only briefly mentioned it on last week's Tuesday episode with Richard. But that ENS airdrop that went out was for the Ethereum name service holders who basically went and bought an Ethereum domain so they could buy, Jimmy.eth, BoredApeYachtClub.eth, SteveMiller.eth, which I own. Don't even try. Um, but if you bought it and you registered an .eth domain via ENS before October 31st, you were airdropped tokens that are basically a piece of their governance network. It's in their initiative to fully decentralize ENS. That token is now basically valued, like that airdrop for most people is valued somewhere in 5 figures. For some people, it was an airdrop worth 6 figures. That is absolutely insane to me. And I still can't believe that it happened. But what people need to be aware of out here is that more of these airdrops are coming. This is like not the first one that's done it. Uniswap was one of the most successful prior, but we're bound to see others. And the one that I want to make sure everybody's aware of before we move forward is MetaMask. That was tipped a little while ago. So, just as a public service announcement, if you have not used MetaMask in your browser to exchange cryptocurrencies, I highly recommend that you at least do two transactions. This is coming from insider sources from Consensus, who owns MetaMask currently, but essentially they're right now theorizing that that token airdrop is going to be dependent on you utilizing the underlying DeFi architecture that MetaMask has built in right now. So, pretty interesting stuff. But the other top stories we want to just quickly bring to your attention, Chris, I want you to lead this one off because you loved this piece.
Yeah, so Burger King partnered up with Robinhood, and if you are a member of their rewards program, so you need the Burger King application on your phone, and then you have to join. It's like the King Club or something along those lines. If you spend at least $5 in the app before a certain date, I forget which, you have a chance to win a certain amount of crypto that will be sent to your Robinhood account. This is a seems like a big deal, and I initially thought it was, and then I thought about it again, and I realized, well, it's through Robinhood, so not your keys, not your crypto, and it's through Robinhood, so they're probably shelling out about $20 million to try and get people back into using their platform to trade crypto because they've seen something like a 50% dip in crypto trades over the last quarter and a half or so. And that made up over 50% of their revenue. So just a little piece as to why this is happening.
I mean, it's a really interesting piece of news for how crypto is starting to touch the real world. But again, I don't read too much into it. I think it's interesting, right? Like, I mean, it's culturally relevant for sure. But in our other top stories this week, Harmony One officially launched their trustless Ethereum bridge today. That's pretty exciting news for everybody in the Harmony One ecosystem. Polkadot also today is finalizing its vote on updating its branding and its brand identity assets, which is kind of interesting to me. I'm not sure why they'd want to mess with that right now when they have all of their parachain auctions, their first set of parachain auctions finalizing. More on that in a second. But also the big, this one's insane to me. Miramax, the massive film studio behind a lot of your favorite films, including Pulp Fiction, is suing Quentin Tarantino for issuing an NFT from Pulp Fiction. It's the dumbest case I've seen this cycle. Um, this is frankly, like, him doing this was great news for Miramax because nobody considers them a viable or relevant studio today. Whereas back in the 90s and the early 2000s, they were still big, right? Um, so the fact that they're going after Quentin Tarantino for issuing an NFT of like basically content from Pulp Fiction that hit the cutting room floor, um, it seems stupid to me. It's really dumb.
Oh yeah,
But
that's not a suit they'll win. And typically, you would think, oh, it's a studio going up against an individual. They're going to win. This is also one of the greatest, most legendary living directors.
yeah,
He has the capital to fight this and probably win. So,
I mean, Chris, when did Pulp Fiction come out? Wasn't that in the late 80s or early 90s?
yeah, I mean, early 90s at the latest.
Yeah, I
That
mean
movie's been out a
fi
while.
yeah, this film is in the public domain at this point, at least for the way that I understand it. Like, it is a cultural piece. He has every right to do this. There was stuff that didn't even make the movie. Um, if anything, the people that are featured in it, like the actors that are featured in it, they may have more of a case than Miramax does, but Miramax definitely doesn't have a case. I mean,
Hmm.
that's just insanity. So, enough about that. I just think it's an insane piece that's come out this week. Next, back to the Polkadot news. Akala Network is officially the first Polkadot parachain. They managed to secure earlier today. And essentially, what this means is that Akala Network will be able to fully deploy on Polkadot, I believe, as soon as it was December 1st was the date that they had targeted. But if you were not totally familiar with Akala, they are going to essentially try to control all of DeFi within Polkadot and be one of the most significant players there. And a bunch of other DeFi protocols will likely be built on top of it or in the relay chains that stem off of Akala's parachain. Again, the other one that you may have heard of beforehand is its Kusama sister project. where they were basically testing all the Akala features and functionality prior to rolling out on Polkadot. And that was a project called Karura. So, last but not least, this came across the wire about an hour and a half ago. And that is that India has made the decision that they're going to ban making payments in crypto, but they will be approving and regulating crypto asset trading. So, on the whole, does this mean that there's like a massive impact to the crypto markets because India's banned something? No. If you start seeing articles that are really highlighting the banning of crypto in India, it's FUD. Because the reality is this is them saying we are definitively going to call cryptocurrencies an asset
Yeah.
property.
And another piece about that, so if you read into it just a little beyond the headlines, the bigger news of this more is there's actually kind of this whole debate and argument going on in the Indian parliament where I think it was either the prime minister or one of their more majority leaders was annoyed that basically none of the Indian politicians actually want to put a label on it or do anything. This is just more kind of the upper echelons of their political system wanting to just force something out. So for all we know, this could completely flip later and they go back to approving making payments in crypto. So don't read into this too much. It's just a piece of news that should be on your radar.
Yeah, I mean, look, to me, this is them saying that we want to, again, continue to control power. Like, that's the reason why we're doing this, because we're going to issue a CBDC. Pretty simple. I mean, that's the clearest flag out of this, because why would they otherwise kill every other, cryptocurrency in terms of payment? Well, because they want you to use a different payment source. Pretty clear. So that's going to wrap up Buy Seller HODL for us this week. If you want to hear more about any one of these stories, please do us a favor, drop into the comments or into the chat. Let us know what you think. We will be around to talk about it more and expand or expound in any way that you would like us to. But if we missed a story, please also bring that to attention. We'd love to cover the stuff that you guys are wanting to hear more about. So again, get in touch with us. You can go at us on Twitter, on Instagram, or even get to both Chris or I directly via at Steve Miller _PHX on Twitter for me and via at It's Meekus on Twitter for Chris. But that is going to, again, do it for Buy Seller HODL. Let's dive into our next segment this week, which is going to be, if I can find the drop, the drop's here. There it is. The Aftershock.
The Aftershock.
So every week here on Cryptocurrent Live on our Thursday show, we bring you the Aftershock, which is the biggest story that is sending shockwaves across the crypto world. This week, we've got a banger. We're talking about Crypto.com, who just scored the naming rights to Staples Center. That is where the LA Lakers play. That is where the LA Kings play. That is where the LA Clippers play. That is where the LA Sparks play. Arguably one of the sports meccas of our country. So, where to begin? Anywhere other than price seems a little bit silly, so let's get into the details. The agreement is a 20-year deal worth $700 million. How is this happening? Right? Like this is crypto entering the public zeitgeist in a brand new way, and I can't. Like this is really, really cool to me.
It's wild. And one thing, so I was thinking about this. This is a huge deal in sports until you think about sports like F1, because if you average this out, it's $35 million a year, give or take, for the naming rights. If you were to be the main name sponsor of a Formula One team, it's something around like 60 to $75 million a year. So although it's the biggest naming rights deal in history, what that actually means is it's the biggest naming rights deal single value on a piece of paper. It doesn't mean it's the highest per year or anything like that. Still an obscene amount of money. And I have a lot of very good opinions on why crypto.com made the right move, but we'll get into that a little later.
Yeah, we'll tackle that in a minute. There's a lot that we plan on expanding into in this story. The biggest piece of which actually has very little to do with Stable Center and a lot more to do with crypto marketing budgets. So we're going to get into more on this in a minute. But I will tell you that, in my opinion, the reason why this is a really, really big deal is because that, to me, actually sounds like a steal. Why? Because in addition to just having the naming rights on the actual building, it also, in the paperwork, makes them the official crypto partner of the LA Lakers, the LA Clippers, the LA Kings, and the LA Sparks. So, I mean, that on its own, like, you have all of these athletes that, again, are massive icons in the sport. LeBron James for the Lakers, Anthony Davis for the Lakers. You have Paul George for the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard when he's playing basketball for the Clippers. You have people playing hockey. I don't care about that sport. And then you have the LA Sparks, which again is the WNBA, and I respect that. But still, these are the biggest teams in sports, arguably, with massive histories. I mean, the Staples Center didn't change its naming rights since 1999.
Yeah.
Okay. It's literally been the Staples Center since 99. And here we are in 2021, and it's going to be taken over by a crypto company. Um,
Yeah.
so the deal is clearly in excess of what FTX paid for the Miami Heat arena. Granted, Miami is still a big market team. I wouldn't say it's LA. And at the same time, in that deal, it's for a shorter period. It's not for 20 years.
I think it's 10.
Yeah, I think it's half of it. Yeah.
And an interesting part of the partnership with all those teams is their official partner, right? I believe Webull is the official partner of the NBA's in terms of trading or something. So you see on all the jerseys the Webull logo, or on a lot of jerseys at least. Now you'll start seeing Crypto.com logo. But more
Yep.
interestingly is that it's either this season or next, but maybe towards the latter half of this NBA season, the LA Clippers are moving to their own stadium. So even though Crypto.com isn't naming that stadium, the LA Clippers will still be wearing jerseys that have the Crypto.com logo and advertising all over it. So that is the bigger steal to me, right? They basically got a 2-for-1 deal for a team that's about to leave.
And granted, for what I understand, it's actually until the Clippers leave the building. So that
Got it.
deal
Okay.
that deal executes when the Clippers leave. However, you still have it on one of the most recognizable jerseys in the world, right? And that's the
Absolutely.
Lakers. So that's really, really big deal. But as much as, like, this is a huge deal for crypto, interesting on the other side of things, local fans are really against this. I mean, really against this. In the same way that, like, people refuse to refer to the Sears Tower as Willis Tower now that it's referred to as the Willis Tower,
It's true.
or Lady Bird Lake in Austin. They refuse to refer to it as Lady Bird Lake. They would rather refer to it as Town Lake. This type of stuff is a big deal, but I think that um, Los Angelinos, as I think they're referring to themselves these days, they need to just get their head out of their butt, because, like, this is a huge deal. But Staples Center has been around for
I mean,
what? I mean,
almost 30 years.
yeah. Well, sorry, no, because the team formed in the '80s, but still, like, they had a different team name for 10 years. Sorry, not team name, stadium name for 10 years. That's not a big deal. It just isn't. So they had Staples Center. Now it's Staples Center for 30 years or 20 years. Yeah, 20 years. That's how math works. That's not a long period of time. It
No.
just isn't. So the whole fervor that the community has behind it, and Paul George's dumb commentary about how it'll always be Staples Center to me, like, bud, you're going to be in the NBA for another 3 years, and then you're going to retire, and nobody's going to really care about your opinion, right?
Yeah.
That's the truth. But the bigger piece is that this name change will actually be going official mid-season. So they're going to be officially Crypto.com Arena, official December 25th of this year.
And I
So,
believe they have a home Christmas game then. So that was probably part of the reason.
oh
But
yeah,
another interesting thing, right? And this was my kind of reading between the lines takeaway is I am sure that both sides of, the Lakers business team, Crypto.com's business team, realized, of course, everyone is still going to call it the Staples Center. That's all they're going to be thinking of it as. And they're all going to tweet about it and write articles about it, because we've seen sports journalists all over the world write articles about it. People that aren't as invested in sports are talking about it. Either they love crypto and like it, they hate crypto and hate it. But at the end of the day, this is more free marketing for crypto.com. All they had to do, obviously, they shelled out a lot of money, but now you have essentially the entirety of American sports media focused on this one topic, giving crypto.com a ton of free press. And that to me is a massive win for them, right? Beyond FTX. Like, it was a big deal when FTX Arena was named. I think it was about 300 million. But then you go and look at this, right? Like, they spent a lot more money, basically are taking over, one of the two most well-known basketball franchises in history, right? Them and the Knicks, Celtics maybe, but those are pretty much the three biggest names in basketball in terms of history. They spent 700 million, with you take inflation and all these other things into account. 20 years from now, this is going to be seen as one of the greatest marketing investments of all time.
Yeah.
Right? It was genius on their part. And, I think if this were a, either or a versus between FTX and crypto.com, I think crypto.com, Steve, has really been winning the marketing battle right now. They've made all of the right moves in my mind. I've known about them for a while, but it seems like a lot of the mainstream media and even a lot of people in crypto really are only just really understanding what they're all about, because they're making this huge investment in marketing.
Oh yeah, and like let's get it very, very clear. Based on the moves that I've been seeing through the last few months, like let's just go back through the World Series, right? There has been no bigger winner than crypto.com. A lot of people thought that what FTX was doing was really impressive. But ever since we started seeing Jason Bourne on television talking about, fortune favors the brave or something like that, like everybody's talking about crypto.com. They're getting their IP in front of a lot of people by integrating into the NBA, into the MLB. Like, I mean, and they're going to keep going head to head with FTX. And guess what? Coinbase is still very much in the equation. So the amount of marketing spend, I couldn't find the number prior to this, but like we are finally seeing crypto relevant companies taking marketing extremely seriously. And I really appreciate that, because not only is that going to lead us down the road towards mass adoption a lot faster, but we could really start seeing industries being born out of this that you would have never expected. Like, this is going to be seen as like one of the biggest catalysts for development and innovation in our country, at the very least in the last like 50 years. By the time that this is all said and done, like it's going to inspire people to be crypto traders, get involved in the decentralized game, start developing things in the metaverse of their own. I mean, you you go around the NBA and go around sports, like you have Steph Curry owning, Bored Apes. He's also a sponsored athlete of FTX. You have Tom Brady as an ambassador of FTX. You have um, FTX being advertised in the World Series on the pitcher's mound with their crazy AR mapping tech that they developed, which still blows my mind. Um, but you will be seeing crypto.com a lot more frequently. And throughout this year, if you're watching the NBA, you're also seeing Coinbase quite frequently, because they are the official partner of the NBA for as a crypto exchange. So
Yeah.
I am impressed. But what I will tell you, Chris, is that I think that this is really just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. And one
we are
thing I
going to
want to
see
note
so much
is,
more.
it's good to see a lot of crypto companies take marketing seriously and invest, right? It's definitely a turn away from more traditional crypto, which is, to put it bluntly, that a lot of people in crypto rave about the financial freedom and how this democratizes everything, but they also all gatekeep the industry, right? You talk to most of these, I'll call them crypto tinfoil hats, the people buried very deep in these, quite frankly, ridiculous projects. And they're like, oh, no one else understands this. I'm a genius. I don't want these other people involved, that's not good. You don't grow an industry by keeping people out of it, especially when the entirety of your industry at the end of the day is an investment opportunity. But the
Yeah.
good news is that these crypto companies are taking it seriously now. And the better news is that they are good crypto companies. These are blue chip brands that aren't going to be able to rug pull and just disappear, because that is the last thing you want to see. More crypto marketing is not always necessarily a good thing, because if it's not a great project and they do a massive, massive marketing push, like we saw with Save the Kids in back in June, July, where they had a lot of influencers kind of pump their coin and then rug pulled, right? That is a bad look for crypto. It basically plays to all the FUD and fears that mainstream media, traditional investment opportunities have about crypto. But when you have massive blue chip exchanges like FTX, Crypto.com, and Coinbase, that is a good thing because they are well run. They are inevitably going to be regulated, but will stay inside the regulations and won't push back too much, right? More than they should. That is a good thing. It's a good look for crypto, and inevitably will make all of our investments worth that much more.
Oh yeah, and that was actually going to lead to my next question because, like, I think that the last piece that we need to take apart here before we sign off for this episode is having to do with, like, okay, we see this happening. We've talked a little bit about, like, how this is going to work as a catalyst for the industry and, within the world. But there are two things I want to know your take on, and I'll share mine if you're curious about it at the very end. But the first is this going to be a catalyst for price as we go into the end of this run? Because I think that at large, you can say this amount of money may impact that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it will be a catalyst for price to some degree, right? It's not going to be the be all end all. You won't see, another crazy bull run from this, but you will see certain coins pump. Some of those coins include crypto.com coin, which already, by the way, is up about 500% since June because it was at like 10 cents a coin. It's the coin you use. The more you hold, the better staking rewards you get in crypto.com's app. But it also partnered with Coinbase, and you can now buy and trade Crow, CRO, that is the crypto.com coin, on Coinbase. And that is a huge piece as to why we saw about, uh, you know, basically a 20-cent pump from where it was a month ago. So you'll see it to some degree. That being said, not all of these announcements will affect every coin, and you can't expect them to.
Hmm.
And I want to leave you all with that.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that I kind of am left thinking about is, like, the market sentiment chart where it's like, what leads to the true blow off top. The true blow off top is built in, by retail FOMO. They don't want to miss it at the very end. So if we're going to stick with this theory that the blow off top is coming at the end of this year, maybe like in December towards the end, which is my current theory, this lines up really well because this is going to put crypto in front of a lot more eyes right when crypto is looking for that retail FOMO to blow the top off. It could easily go into next year as well because the finals take place in February, something like that.
Oh no, NBA finals are next June.
Really, that far away?
Hmm.
Wild. Um,
Oh
oh
yeah,
yeah, that's because they had the condensed season last season. That's right.
yeah.
Um,
They're COVID kind of threw a wrench into everything.
yeah, I'm just being reminded that COVID happened. Crazy. Never would have thought. I forgot about that.
And
Uh,
interesting, you were talking about the end of this year, the end of December, as when that next blow off top comes, because a year ago, right, was a, basically all of crypto was as a whole about half of where it is now, and then January happened and everything exploded. And so I think it would be a good estimation or guess to assume that, wow, maybe a year later we see that again, especially after this major marketing push by massive, massive blue chip exchanges.
yeah, and again, like, there's a theory out there that right now is saying that this could, in fact, like, we could get the blow off top for Bitcoin closer to February. But guess what? There are just as many catalysts out there it would catalyze retail FOMO to go insane, as there are here if there's a December push. Because guess who's going to be advertising at the Super Bowl? First weekend of February. I would be hard pressed to think that Coinbase, FTX, and Crypto.com are not very prepared to buy ad space for the Super Bowl next year. But the last thing that I think this is actually going to end up being a catalyst for is increasing the amount of attention and commentary that we end up having in the regulatory space as well. Um, it's something that, again, like I like to think that we end up talking about regulatory a little bit more on our Tuesday shows, but we're constantly bringing up these little topics that are tied to crypto regulation because it's important. It's going to determine our freedom in the future to invest in and take part in the building out of Web3. So, in my opinion, I'm curious what you think. Do you think that we're going to end up seeing this whole massive marketing push, because we're well into the billions of dollars now in terms of the overall number? Do you think that this is going to light a further fire under regulators to have a real discussion about this, considering it's coming to the public eye just this much more?
I don't think it will yet, right? I think, especially in the United States right now, you have this massive $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that doesn't really go into effect for a while, but that is still going to be the primary focus of regulators and politicians in this country through January at the very least. And then after that, right, in February, you have the Super Bowl. And for those who don't know, basically every single person in America is either watching the Super Bowl or will hear about it. And so politicians are obviously included in that, especially when a very large chunk of them are from the southern United States, where traditionally football is a huge deal.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so you're going to get a lot more eyes on it from politicians and regulators who probably, quite frankly, right now don't really think of it as something too serious, but it will put it back on the forefront right after this infrastructure bill is kind of put to bed.
Yeah, no question. Well, look, guys, that's going to do it for the Aftershock this week. If you enjoyed this segment, please let us know in the comments. And again, if this is your first time viewing us on YouTube, please do us a favor, like, subscribe, leave a comment. We want to get feedback from you in the best way that we can so that we can continue to improve this show for you. Again, we do this show every Tuesday and Thursday now at 7 p.m. Eastern. We also bring out brand new interview content every Monday and Friday. So you can sit down and hear from Richard, speaking with a number of industry experts and guests from all across crypto. But that is, in fact, going to do it for us this week for Cryptocurrent Live. We, again, really appreciate you being here. Just one final note. If you missed it earlier on this week, on Monday, we had Riddick Duda sit down with Richard from Sublime Finance talking about crypto lending. And then tomorrow, Richard is sitting down with Christopher Lesoit from Request Finance, which is an asset management protocol. But also next week, we have two great episodes coming up that I want to make sure you're aware of. One of which comes out on Monday with Ingo Rube from Discrete Identity Representation Protocol called Kilt. And then also Leighton Emmons, who is coming to us from an NFT project called Blockchain Boys Club, which is basically an NFT that's trying to unite alpha seekers, people that want to be way ahead of the curve in terms of large investment plays where they can make a lot of freaking money. So, any final announcements from you? Do we have any other short form content coming up that you want to share?
Yeah, so next Wednesday we'll have another episode of Crypto Basics with Chris K exclusively on our YouTube channel. Topic to be determined. I guess you'll just have to tune in to find out. But that's all from me today, Steve.
Awesome. Well, look, you again can always find us online via socials at _cryptocurrent_ or on Instagram at cryptocurrent_. You can also find all of our articles and our great editorial content up at crypto-current.co. I have been Stephen Miller. You can follow me at Steve Miller_PHX. He's been Chris Corneros. You can follow him at It's Mikas. It's been great hanging out with you. Do us a favor. Stay cryptocurrent. We'll see you next time.